In early M31, during the course of the civil war known as the Horus Heresy, the Night Lord's traitor legion would launch an assault upon the world of Sotha in an attempt to capture a piece of ancient Xenos technology known as the Pharaohs Beacon. The Pharaohs itself was of vital strategic importance, as it not only allowed Loyalist forces a way to navigate through the ruin storm, acting as a proverbial lantern in the darkness, but could even allow those in control of it to pinpoint or teleport directly to any location that they desired, consciously or otherwise. The ensuing battle would prove to be a bloody and costly affair for both sides, with neither side wishing to relinquish control of the beacon to the other. Eventually, the Night Lords would succeed in capturing the Pharaohs Beacon, hoping to use it so as to ascertain the location of their Primarch, Conrad Kurz, and their Legion's flagship, the Nightfall. The Loyalist Iron Warrior and Warden of the Pharaohs, Barabbas Dantioch, would manage to overload the beacon, though at the cost of his own life. The resulting energy discharge would succeed in disabling or destroying a number of traitor ships that hung in orbit of Sotha, allowing Imperial forces to ultimately claim victory. Despite securing an important victory for the Imperium, Dantioch's actions may have ultimately condemned all life within the galaxy to its inevitable extinction. Deep within the lifeless void between galaxies, the energy unleashed by the Pharaohs Beacon would be detected by a race of creatures that may arguably prove to be the greatest threat to all life, the Tyranids. Slowly but surely, the Hive Fleets of the Great Devourer would begin to make their ponderous journey towards the Milky Way Galaxy, seeking to consume all life within their path. While individual bioships and splinter fleets are rumoured to have made their way into the Milky Way Galaxy prior to this, it would take the greater bulk of the Tyranid race over 10,000 years to reach the eastern fringes of the galaxy. The first officially recognised encounter between humanity and the Tyranids would be with the appearance of Hive Fleet Behemoth, which in turn would lead to the events of the First Tyrannic War. Over the next several centuries, numerous other Hive Fleets would make their way into the galaxy, leaving entire planetary systems stripped clean of all life, with not even a single microbe escaping their unending hunger. Few who stand against the unending swarm of the Tyranids will live to recount their experiences, as more often than not, those who dare challenge the might of the Hive Fleets will have their biomass harvested by these extragalactic predators. Despite the many documented encounters with the Tyranids made by a variety of races, the creatures of the Hive Fleets are shrouded in mystery, with numerous rumours and hypotheses existing in regards to their origins. So just how could the Tyranid race have come into existence? The first possibility, even though it may be the most difficult to believe, is that the Tyranids came about as a result of natural selection and evolution. While this would indeed prove to be the simplest explanation, one could only begin to imagine the various environmental extremes that the creatures must have encountered upon their world of origin to transform them into such an adaptable, resilient, and deadly race, if the Tyranids did indeed naturally evolve over millions of years. Perhaps the theoretical Protonid species had simply evolved to become the dominant predator upon their world, only to inadvertently drive all other life upon it to extinction. This in turn could have forced the species to evolve the ability to traverse through the depths of space, so as to locate fresh feeding grounds. Alternatively, perhaps these Protonids instead sought to avoid a cataclysmic event which threatened to drive the species into extinction, such as the inevitable destruction of their homeworld due to increasingly violent tectonic upheavals. While both of these hypotheses are indeed fairly plausible, there are many who argue that such creatures are incapable of coming into existence through natural selection, due to the process of evolution typically occurring over thousands, if not millions of years. That being said, however, with how adaptable the modern-day Tyranids are, it is theoretically possible that their ancestors could have borne something akin to a mutagenic DNA structure, allowing them to adapt at a much faster rate than other species. However, instead of the Tyranids being the result of evolution taken to its most extreme, could it be possible that the species was, in actuality, artificially engineered? Given how rapidly the Tyranids are able to evolve, combined with their ability to render entire planets into lifeless expanses of bedrock by consuming not only all forms of biological matter, but also various kinds of minerals and metals, it's certainly a distinct possibility that the species was created to act as some form of self-replicating biological weapon. But if this were indeed the case, is there a way to determine which race is responsible for the creation of the Tyranids? As it stands, there are 3 potential candidates in this regard. The first of which are the ancient and enigmatic beings known as the Old Ones. This is due primarily to the fact that the Old Ones were responsible for creating many of the sentient races that exist within the galaxy, such as the Eldari, Krork, Jakero, Slan, and Hrud. With this in mind, it wouldn't be entirely outside the realm of possibility for the Old Ones to have had a hand in the creation of the Tyranids. Perhaps the Old Ones had engineered the Tyranids with the intention of using them to, in essence, wipe the galactic slate clean, should their creations ever decide to rebel against them. The idea that the Hive Fleets were a creation of the Old Ones is loosely supported within the book Xenology, with a series of images depicted upon an ancient stone tablet. This tablet depicts the gods of the Eldari, in this case the Old Ones, creating the various races that are known to exist within the galaxy. Some of these races are instantly recognizable, such as the Eldari and Hrud. One of the various races depicted could, at least theoretically, be a type of protonid. Not only does this creature sport a superficially reptilian appearance, much like the Tyranids themselves, but the spiked ridges along its back could be a stylized representation of an armored carapace, which is a common trait shared by many Tyranid bioforms. However, there are a few problems with this possibility. The first of which is that the creature depicted upon the stone tablet would appear to only have 4 limbs instead of the 6 sported by Tyranid organisms. As such, there is a high probability that this creature depicted is of another reptiloid race entirely, such as the Loxatl or Tyrellians. Secondly, the Tyranids, as far as we're aware, originate from outside the galaxy itself, while the Old Ones, as stated within the 8th edition Necron Codex, had evolved within the Milky Way Galaxy. This means that, unless some of their number deliberately expanded beyond the boundaries of the Milky Way, it seems unlikely that the Old Ones could have had a hand in creating a race that existed somewhere far beyond. And thirdly, if the Old Ones indeed created a race that was intended to be used as a weapon, then why weren't such creatures unleashed during the course of the War in Heaven, the conflict between the Old Ones and the Necron Tier Empire? While conflicts between the Tyranids and the Necrons are relatively uncommon in comparison to their wars against other races, battles between both factions have been known to occur, as shown within the novella Devourer. After all, the savagery and viciousness of the Hive Fleets would prove to be a powerful weapon against the Necrons and their C'tan masters, especially if such creatures were supported upon the battlefield by the other creations of the Old Ones, although it could be argued that these theoretical protonids may have been unable to aid the Old Ones during their conflict due to still being beyond the boundaries of the galaxy. However, this then leads into the second possible candidate, that the Tyranids were instead creations of the Necrons, or more specifically, the ruler of the Necron Tier Empire, the Silent King. It is well known that following the War in Heaven, and the subsequent Necron revolt against their C'tan masters, Sharek, the last of the Silent Kings, would choose to embark on a journey outside of the galaxy, while his subjects would enter a period of prolonged stasis known as the Great Sleep. As he travelled across the vast expanse of space, the Silent King would encounter the Hive Fleets before returning to the Milky Way Galaxy. However, some have suggested that instead of merely encountering the Hive Fleets, the Silent King was, in actuality, responsible for their creation. While this would appear to be incredibly unlikely, the main piece of supporting evidence for this particular notion comes from the January 2020 edition of White Dwarf magazine. Within the pages of an article dedicated to the Silent King, there exists a conversational transcript between Lord Inquisitor Draxus and an Eldari seer, designated simply as Contact Upsilon. Upsilon describes to the Inquisitor a vision that she had experienced, which focused upon what she describes as the Lord of the Necron tier.
Regardless, behold, there was once a lord harboring such lust for power that evil itself coalesced around him into fell beings that were mirror shades of his ambition. His timeless hate was driven into everything he encountered, even his own people. Yet, it was in life's light his enmity truly blossomed. Not content with driving it from his own kingdom, he sought to excise life from the wider world. In secret, he moved beyond the horizons of the world for an age, and there he bred horrors of infinite hunger. Finally pleased with their form, he showed them the shining light of the world and unleashed them upon it, where they moved from kingdom to kingdom, devouring everything. Bereft of life, his own kingdom is safe, and he laughs while all others weep in grief.
While this vision is certainly prosaic and allegorical, there are a few pieces of information that can be derived from the seer's words, which would appear to support the notion of the Tyranids being the creations of the Silent King. The lust for power held by the Silent King could be that of wishing to unite his people by instigating a conflict against the Old Ones, so that he could once again obtain total control over his empire, while the evil that coalesced around him could be representations of the Khitan, as it would be the Necron tier who would construct corporeal bodies comprised of living metal for these beings, due to the Khitan originally boasting a diaphanous, almost ethereal form. The world described in this vision is an analogy for the Milky Way Galaxy, and the fact that this lord, who to reiterate was described by the seer as being the lord of the Necron tier, traversed past the world's horizon, would certainly correlate with the fact that Sharek did indeed make his way beyond the outer limits of the galaxy. The beings of infinite hunger would almost certainly appear to be an allusion to the Tyranids, whose consumption of countless billions of worlds would earn them the moniker of the Great Devourer. The shining light of the world could also be a reference to the energies unleashed by the Pharaohs Beacon, which would attract the greater bulk of the Tyranid race towards it in their eternal search for prey. Since the Pharaohs was later confirmed to be of Necron origin, as shown within the novel Belisarius' call The Great Work, this could be interpreted as the Necrons showing the Hive Fleets, for want of a better term, the very light of the galaxy. While this would appear to heavily support the notion that the Silent King was indeed responsible for the engineering of the Tyranids, this hypothesis is not without its flaws. The first of which is that this vision, as mentioned earlier, is full of symbolism and allegory. Because of this, the events described within can be argued as being open to interpretation, and should not necessarily be taken literally. Secondly, the events witnessed during this vision would appear to contradict a number of statements that were made earlier within the same article. It is stated outright that after encountering the Tyranids and witnessing their limitless hunger, the Silent King would return to the Milky Way Galaxy in order to unite the entirety of the Necron race against this very threat. While Sharek bore no love towards any of the other civilizations that inhabited the galaxy, he believed that any hope of returning his people to true life within bodies of flesh and blood lay within the biological integrity of these younger races, which could be harvested to create new organic forms for the Necron tier. If all biological matter within the galaxy was consumed by the Hive Fleets, then Sharek's plans for his people would never come to pass. This would seem to be at odds with the notion that the Silent King played a part in the creation of the Tyranid race. That being said, however, it is always possible that Sharek intended to engineer the Tyranids as a biological weapon to unleash against those races created by the Old Ones, which fought against Sharek's forces during the War in Heaven, such as the Eldari and Krork, only for the Tyranids to evolve beyond the Silent King's ability to command. If this were indeed the case, then this loss of control over the Tyranids could be due to Sharek's implementation of a collective consciousness known as the Hive Mind, which could have been created utilizing a Khitan shard that proceeded to rebel against the Silent King. While this may seem somewhat unlikely, it's worth remembering that there are many examples of necron technology that are fueled by the fragments of these godlike entities, such as that of the Pharaohs Beacon itself, which was originally powered by 8 of these shards. But if the Silent King did not have a hand in the creation of the Tyranids, and that the vision witnessed by the Eldari seer was little more than a red herring, there still exists one more potential candidate to the identity of the theoretical engineers of the Hive Fleets: the Zotes. The Zotes are an intelligent race of reptilian, centaur-like creatures, which made first contact with the Imperium during M38. Numerous Zote fleets, which would be retroactively designated by the Imperium as Hive Fleet Colossus, would be discovered by Imperial forces as the Xenos made their way into the galaxy and attempted to journey into Segmentum Tempestus and Ultima Segmentum. The Zotes, as detailed within the 4th edition Tyranid Codex, claimed to be fleeing both slavery and oppression, and the race would begin to establish relations with a number of other species, as well as colonizing numerous worlds. However, these actions undertaken by the Zotes would lead to the Imperium declaring war upon Colossus, declaring the race as Xenos Horribilis, leading to the events of the Zoroastra-Attila Wars. The last Zote fleet was reportedly destroyed in early M39, although the denizens of Colossus would appear once again in late M41, launching an invasion of the world of Fresiax and coming into conflict with the Space Wolves under the command of Bran Redmore. There are numerous pieces of supporting evidence which could substantiate the notion of the Zotes being the creators of the Tyranid race. The first of which is that the Zotes, like the Tyranids themselves, appeared from outside the Milky Way Galaxy, suggesting that they could have originated from the same galaxy as the Tyranids, although it is also possible that they are merely refugees which had fled from the insatiable hunger of the Hive Fleets as their galaxy was stripped clean of life. The second piece of supporting evidence, as documented within the Games Workshop Forgotten Hive Fleets article, is that the Zotes were known to utilize a number of Tyranid biomorphs as weapons, in addition to numerous pieces of more traditional technology. While the act of equipping these biomorphs is described as being an incredibly painful process, it is suggested that the Zotes maintained full control over their senses when wielding these bioweapons, which could potentially imply that biomorphs and later the Tyranids themselves were created to be used by the Zotes as weapons of war. Zotes are also shown to sport a number of physiological similarities with many Tyranid bioforms, in particular a hexapodal body type. Throughout the galaxy, the majority of sentient races have evolved to develop 4 limbs, most commonly sporting a pair of arms and a pair of legs, although some races, such as the Silith, will sport 4 arms and no legs at all. The development of 6 limbs within vertebrate organisms, however, is a much rarer trait, appearing to be sported only by the Tyranids, the Zotes, and a number of lesser forms of wildlife. The Zotes themselves share a body plan that is highly evocative of many lesser Tyranid organisms, such as the Termagant, which could suggest that the Hive Fleets were designed to superficially resemble the Zotes in appearance, similar to how many examples of automata developed by the Adeptus Mechanicus, such as Castellan robots, will have a vaguely humanoid form. Despite this, there are a few species that exist within the galaxy, such as the Rakghoul, that also have a greater number of limbs when compared to other races. However, the greatest piece of potential evidence to support the possibility that the Zotes may have created the Tyranids is that the Zotes, unlike almost every other documented race, would appear to not have had their DNA integrated into the very genetic structure of the Hive Fleets. When Tyranids consume organic matter, they are able to reconstitute the genetic sequences of their victims to create new adaptations for their various organisms or create entirely new bioform strains. The DNA of the Eldari, for example, was heavily implied to have been utilized in the development of the zoanthrope, whilst the Orcs would provide the genetic material necessary for the creation of the biovore. Zotes, however, have been documented as fighting alongside the forces of the Hive Fleets, as opposed to the Tyranids engineering an entirely new bioform strain from their genetic sequence. This could be due to the possibility that the Zotes may either be genetically incompatible with Tyranid physiology, or that the race had attempted to develop a failsafe during their creation of the Tyranids, in order to prevent their own race from being consumed. If the Tyranids attempted to consume the Zotes, then this could have triggered, for lack of a better term, a genetic kill switch, possibly by introducing a viral agent into the Tyranid gene pool, which would eventually drive the Hive Fleets into extinction. However, it would appear that over time, the Tyranids would discover a way in which to overcome this flaw, by instead choosing to enslave the bulk of the Zote race. This in turn would force those remaining Zotes that escaped the yoke of Tyranid oppression to flee into the Milky Way Galaxy in search of a new home. But it remains unclear as to what purpose slaves would serve for the Hive Fleets, given their apparently bestial nature. That being said, however, the Tyranids could have chosen to enslave the Zotes solely for the purpose of preventing their creators from finding a way to fully control or eradicate the Hive Fleets. For if the Zotes were indeed able to create the Tyranids, then it would be logical to assume that they would also know of a way to destroy them. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.